listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and today, man, we have another show lineup for y'all today. We have a special guest today. Her name is Celeste Headlee. She is the host of the podcast Big Sugar. You can hear it on iHeartRadio, and we're going to learn everything about this amazing podcast. She is going to talk to us today, everything about this show and how you can learn from this. So first and foremost, Celeste, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks.
I appreciate you being on. So tell us a little bit about this podcast because it's very interesting.
Yeah, this is a result of a 3-year investigation into the sugar industry in the United States. And it focuses on two brothers, Alfie and Pepe von Hool, who are behind one of the biggest sugar companies in the United States. They're Cuban exiles who built an empire here, and a massive lawsuit that involved Jamaican workers who were trying to recoup some of the wages that they lost while cutting sugarcane. So, yeah.
Yeah, I listened to some episodes. I mean, a lot of the work conditions is mind-blowing, what they had to go through.
Yeah, I mean, cutting sugarcane is really, really tough. I don't know if you've ever seen an actual cane of sugar. Sugarcane is a massive plant. It can grow very, very tall, well over my head, and it's thick. Some of these cane, you need both hands to get around it, and it's thick like wood. And so you have to have a very, very strong back and arm to cut through it, and you need an extraordinarily sharp machete. And so these workers would have to be out there in the Florida and Louisiana sun just all day long for 8 hours, swinging that machete over and over to cut through this cane. And of course, with a sharp machete like that, if you make a mistake, you're going to have a horrifying injury. They could not get Americans to do this work. For centuries, they had to enslave massive numbers of people in order to harvest sugarcane. When that didn't work, sugarcane growers fraudulently tricked and held captive a large number of African Americans in order to harvest it. The Department of Justice stepped in. When they couldn't do that anymore, they started using migrant workers, mostly from the Caribbean. That's where this all started. And that's sort of where the podcast begins. And then we move forward to the present time.
And what's interesting is this whole deal about is sugar tax. For the audience, give us some background on that whole spiel.
Yeah, not only are they not taxed, the U.S. sugar program is part of the Farm Bill, which is a huge, completely unsexy piece of legislation that comes up for reauthorization every 4 years. Most Americans don't pay any attention to it whatsoever, but it's worth trillions of dollars of our money. And essentially, these few sugar companies, just a few of them, get between they get billions of dollars of our tax money. They get paid to grow sugarcane. And that's because back during the time when the world was at war, the government was afraid that we would not be growing sugar here and we'd have to rely on other countries for sugar, and we'd run out. And so they started incentivizing the growing of sugar. Obviously, that's not true anymore. We don't need to incentivize it. So these billions of dollars are a relic of the World War. And yet the lobbying arm of the sugar industry is still so strong that we as taxpayers are still paying that money to these incredibly wealthy sugar barons. Not only are we still paying that money, but our sugar that we pay for in the store is more expensive. We pay more for it than almost any other developed nation. So we're really paying a ton of money. And if you go, I visited their homes, these massively luxurious homes. Alfie and Pepe von Hool live just up the street from Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Their yachts are huge. And I see where the money is going, but it's your money. It's my money.
Man, I appreciate you giving us clarity on that, because what's interesting also with the podcast, you managed to secure some firsthand accounts from workers, lawyers, and journalists. How important is it for them to have the opportunity to shed light on, a situation that's very gray area?
Yeah, we spoke with some of these Jamaican workers who had been part of that migrant program, and the stories they tell, I mean, I don't know what your reaction was, but it was, it's tough to listen to. And frankly, like as an American, I felt ashamed. This is work that we wouldn't do as Americans. We weren't going to do this for that tiny amount of money that they were being paid. And so we brought these Jamaicans over to do this work for us, to bring sugar to our table so we could spoon it into our coffee. And then we treated them like dirt. I mean, they, sharing their stories of what they went through it's awful. And then this years-long court case on our justice system, and they did not get justice. It's a familiar story, especially if you're Black and brown in America. It doesn't make it better just because it's familiar, but it's heartbreaking.
We're talking to our guest, Celeste Headlee, host of the podcast Big Sugar, here on iHeartRadio. And you, as a professional, as a journalist and a host for many shows, why is it important for people to really appreciate these stories that you're showing? Because I didn't know anything about this until I listened to a couple of episodes.
Yeah, and as a journalist, I understand that there is a lot of important issues in the world. And it's when you read the news or watch the news, every story, the journalists say, this is really important. We tell you everything's important. And it's impossible for you to pay attention to every single one. I totally get that. But every once in a while, something has to be paid attention to. And that's true now for sugar. And the reason is because the Farm Bill only comes up for reauthorization every 4 years. And if we as Americans don't pay attention now, if we don't call our representatives now, then the next 4 years, our billions of our tax dollars goes back to these sugar barons again. I just want you to think about all the things that our politicians tell us we don't have money for. All those things they say we can't afford, whether it's in education or healthcare. And then that money is going to these sugar companies instead. So this is that moment. This is the moment when we have to look up and pay attention to this and vote and call all your representatives.
What some resources or organizations would you recommend to our listeners if they wanted to be further engaged in the topics after hearing some of the episodes on the podcast?
First, I would get in touch with some of the environmental organizations that are working, especially in the Everglades. These sugar companies are often in Louisiana and in Texas and in Florida. They are burning down the sugar once they finish harvesting it, because that's the cheapest way to, get rid of the old sugar plants so they can plant again. And as you can imagine, that's horrible for the environment. It's causing all kinds of troubles for the Everglades. And in the end, yet again, the American taxpayers have to pick up that bill. It's going to cost us as citizens trillions to clean up that mess. So there are a lot of environmental organizations that are filing suit. They are taking action to try and hold these companies accountable for the damage that they have done. I absolutely suggest that people get involved, even if it's just a donation, but, start signing petitions and getting involved. Also, really, people underestimate how much a phone call or a postcard that you send to your representative matters. I can tell you, as a journalist covering politics for over 25 years, they do matter. Especially when they happen by the dozens or even the hundreds. It really does make a difference.
You can listen to Big Sugar on iHeartRadio. It is a deep dive into the inner workings of the industry. I mean, man, these stories are like I said, some of them are going to be very offensive, and others it's just going to be a real awakening of what's really been going on with these workers and this industry. So first and foremost, I want to say thanks again to Celeste Headlee for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome, and have a great one.